As I was riding along, I heard two animals jumping up in the long grass. When they got close enough for me to see what they were, I saw there were two lions. Anyhow, as he was dragging me, it struck me about my sheath knife, and I wondered if the knife was there. And what worried me was whether he was going to kill me first or was going to eat me alive.
That voice was recorded more than 60 years ago. And then, as far as anyone can tell, it disappeared. It was never broadcast, never published. It surfaced again only recently. An old recording that had simply been waiting all this time to be heard. The man speaking is old, and he is remembering a night more than 120 years ago. The night he was carried off in the jaws of a lion. And what he did next with the only weapon left to him. He was never famous beyond this country. But every ranger who has ever worn the uniform of the Kruger National Park knows his name. My name is Malcolm Gooding, and this is the story of Harry Wolhuter, told by Harry Wolhuter. To hear it properly, you must first forget the Kruger Park you know. No tar roads, no rest camps, no fences. This is the Sabi Game Reserve at the beginning of the last century. A strip of wild, half-mapped low-veld between two rivers, and a country barely out of war between Boer and Brit. The warden, James Stevenson Hamilton, had a handful of rangers to patrol thousands of square miles of it. One of the first men he hired was a lean young ex-soldier who knew his country better than any map.
It was in the year 1902 when I was returning from the Oliphants after a long patrol in the old Sabi Game Reserve, before Colonel Hamilton had changed it into the Kruger National Park.
A long patrol, winding home. At the first waterhole, the pools were dry. So Wolhuter rode ahead of his party towards the next water, at Metsi, leaving the pack donkeys to follow behind. Two dogs travelled with them. One stayed back. The other, a rough bush dog named Bull, trotted along behind the horse.
I rode along, and it got dark afterwards, but I didn't mind that because during the Boer War, I often used to ride along that path during the summer months to escape the heat of the sun, because I was in charge of the pickets along that border.
A man entirely at ease in the dark, on a path he had ridden 100 times. And then the grass moved.
As I was riding along, I heard two animals jumping up in the long grass, and I thought they were reedbuck because there were several reedbuck round about. And I thought they would just run across the path in front of me and disappear. But instead of the running, crossing the path, it came towards me. It was dark, but I could hear all this. When they got close enough for me to see what they were, I saw there were two lions.
Two lions, coming at a gallop, and no time for the rifle.
I never dreamt of there being lions because there were not supposed to be any lions there. So there was no chance to shoot or do anything. The only thing was to turn round my horse and clear. I turned the horse round and jammed spurs into him, but before he could get speed up, the one lion jumped on his hind quarters and knocked me out of the saddle. The other lion was in the act of running around to get the horse by the head. Fortunately, I say fortunately, I fell almost on top of him, right in front of him. So all he had to do was to get hold of me by the shoulder, and not by the head as they very often do, and to drag me away.
held by the shoulder in the teeth of a full-grown lion, being dragged backwards towards the dry stream bed. And Harry Wolhuter, conscious the entire way, had time to think about what was coming.
He started dragging me down towards the spruit. And what worried me was whether he was going to kill me first or was going to eat me alive.
His rifle was lost in the fall. His horse was gone. His men were miles behind him, in the dark. What he had, perhaps, was a sheath knife on his belt. In falls from a horse during the war, the same knife had slipped its sheath and been lost in the long grass.
As he was dragging me, it struck me about my sheath knife, and I wondered if the knife was there, because during the Boer War, when I was in charge of the pickets, I used to hunt wildebeest for meat for the camp, and on one or two occasions I'd come a cropper with my horse trod in a hole, and another time he's upset by a fallen tree. And both occasions the knife fell out of the sheath. So I wondered if the knife was still there. And as he was dragging me away, it took me a long time to get my hand round to where the knife was, because the lion had hold of me by the right shoulder, and I had to put my hand round underneath my body to get at the knife. Eventually I found the knife. It's still there. And I thought then, well, what shall I do? I'd heard that if you hit a cat on the nose, he's got to sneeze before he can do anything. I thought, shall I slash him across the nose? I thought, no. If I do, he might drop me and just bite me again. So I thought the best thing to be to try and find his heart.
One chance. Feel for the shoulder.
And as he was dragging me, I felt for his shoulder, and then I stuck him twice behind the shoulder where I knew his heart was. And then he dropped me, but stood where he was over me. And then I stuck him in the chest again. And again let out an awful roar. The blood squirted all over me, so I think I must have cut his jugular vein. He then left me and disappeared in the darkness in the long grass.
3 strokes of an ordinary sheath knife. And then, because he was Harry Wolhuter, got to his feet, drenched in the lion's blood, and shouted after it.
And then I'd heard about the power of the human voice over animals, and I thought I'd scare this lion. I called him all the names I could think of. I don't think that bush had ever heard such names before.
The defiance lasted a few seconds, because there had been 2 lions.
Well, I thought, well, that's all very well, but what about the other lion, which was chasing the horse? And what about when he comes back? He'll find me on the ground.
1 lion, dying somewhere in the grass. 1 lion, circling back. A man, half stripped, bleeding hard from the shoulder, alone in the dark, looking for a tree.
There were several trees about, but they were all straight stems, and I couldn't climb them. Eventually I found a tree with the branches low down, and I climbed up first in one branch, then another, and then I got up into the main branch. And eventually I got a seat in the tree about 12 feet from the ground. I settled down. I felt awfully sick, and I was bleeding, and most of my clothes were torn off. There wasn't much for a start. I only had a shirt and trousers on, but most of them were torn off, other lines. I thought I'd probably faint with the loss of blood. And I tied myself around a tree with a belt and a big bandana handkerchief I had.
Lashed to a branch 12 feet up, he waited. And in that enormous stillness, the bush told him everything that was happening below, both halves of the story at once.
In the stillness of the night one can hear the least sound. I heard the other lion coming back. I could hear him come trotting along, and he came to where the dead lion was, and then he took my blood spool and came up to the tree and tried to climb the tree. I heard that one lion dying. I've heard him groaning, and eventually I heard a death rattle in his throat, and I knew he was dead. I felt quite a bit better then. I thought, well, I've done something that not everybody could do.
Below him, the living lion kept its vigil at the base of the tree. What kept it from settling in, hour after hour, all through that night, was the dog.
My dog, I could also hear him coming back through the long grass. The dog barked at the lion, and the lion chased him. He ran away, but he came back every time and worried the lion.
Deep in the night, his party finally caught up. First, the camp cook, walking ahead with the supper things balanced on his head. Wolhuter called out of the darkness to warn him, and sent him straight up a tree of his own. Then the 2 reserve policemen arrived with the donkeys, fired shots into the dark to drive the lion off, built a fire, and eased him down out of the branches, frozen stiff, his right arm hanging useless. His first word was water. There was none. The pools were dry. They laid him down at the bare picket post at Metsi, ironically the meaning of which is water, water, in Isisutu, a language of that area. And the 2 policemen went out into the night and came back after what felt to him like hours, with a canvas nosebag, half full of something that was more mud than water. He drank it, nearly to the bottom. He kept back just enough for a mug of tea, and a little to wash his wounds. In the morning, he sent them back along his own blood spoor. They found the lion lying dead, a short way from the tree, and came back at midday, carrying its skin. They found the horse, too, alive, clawed down both hindquarters, the saddle still sitting square on its back.
They rubbed some salt in. I think it did good. Pity they didn't rub some salt in my wounds, too. That would have prevented from going septic.
The nearest help was at Kamatipuert, 4 days away. They carried him out of the bush in a mashila, a stretcher slung from a pole, made from one of his own blankets, while the wounds turned septic and the arm began to poison him. From Kamatipuert, a friend got him onto the train to the hospital at Barberton, where, in a clean bed for the first time in months, Harry Wolhuter finally let himself lose consciousness.
After a few days, the doctor came and he lanced it. And he got about half a bucket, half of those slop buckets that they have in hospital, full of pus out of this wound. After that it became a bit easier. And then all of a sudden it started on again. After a few days it started again, right in the shoulder joint. And the doctor said he couldn't make out what the reason was.
2 doctors consulted at his bedside and were defeated. It was a young nurse who solved it, quietly and entirely against the rules.
And the nurse that took charge of me said if I promised not to tell the doctor, she'd see what she could do. I said, I promise anything, nurse, if you can only ease the pain. So she got a probe and she stuck it up my arm, right up into the shoulder joint. And I said to her, that's the place, nurse. and she pulled it out, and a little bloody fluid came out of it. It was that little bloody fluid trying to get out, and it couldn't find an exit. But after that it felt easier. And she used to come with this probe every day and stick it up. And my nerves were so low at the time, although it wasn't painful, I fairly used to shiver and shake when I saw the nurse come along with his probe. But eventually she got all the matter and liquid out of the joint, and it healed up.
Harry Wolhuter kept the arm, and he kept the job. He served that wild country for more than 40 years, long enough to watch the Sabi Game Reserve become the Kruger National Park. And he set it all down in a book, Memories of a Game Ranger, that South Africans have loved ever since. And if you find yourself doubting any of what you've just heard, you can go and look for yourself. In the Stevenson Hamilton Museum at Skukuza, the knife is still there. An ordinary sheath knife, small enough to make you stare. Beside it lies the skin of the lion, and far out on the Lindanda path, past Shokwani, the road that carries Wolhuter's own bush name, a plaque marks the place. A line of stone cairns paces out the 100 meters he was dragged, and the tree itself, dead now for many years, still stands, set upright in concrete, because nobody in the Kruger Park has ever quite had the heart to let it fall. The park has never stopped saying his name. Its oldest wilderness trail, walked on foot, the way the first rangers patrolled, is the Wolhuter Trail, named for Harry and for his son Henry, who followed his father into a ranger's life.
Well, I got better and had to learn to walk and all that sort of thing. And I left the hospital. I can't use my arm much now, but still, I use it a bit.
Harry Wolhuter, in his own voice. Lindanda. You have been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.